On the moonless night of November 12, 1970, the first terrifying whispers of the cyclone's arrival rippled across the black waters of the Bay of Bengal towards the low-lying nation of East Pakistan. At first, meteorologists could scarcely believe their radar scope readings. What seemed a routine tropical disturbance had inexplicably detonated into a nightmare storm of unprecedented power. With demonic swiftness, the cyclone had explosively intensified into a severe Category 5 monster, its spiraling eyewall sculpting waves up to 35 feet high as winds whipped over 150 miles per hour. And this force of biblical rage was barreling directly towards one of the most densely populated coastal regions on the planet, the Ganges Delta shoreline packed with millions of impoverished villagers. But the doomed men, women and children living in the cyclone's path had no idea their fate was about to be savagely upended by the oncoming tempest. East Pakistan had virtually no warning systems to detect such storms, no means of broadcasting emergency evacuation orders to its rural masses. And in one of the most reprehensibly vile acts of political oppression and genocide in modern history, the Pakistani military regime ruling the territory purposely chose not to alert or prepare the coastal populations for the cyclone's apocalyptic onslaught. As weather maps revealed the cyclone's horrifying trajectory towards his domain, President Yahya Khan issued a stunning series of criminal directives. Do not tell East Pakistan about the storm's approach. Let them be blindsided by nature's wrath. One of Khan's most notorious generals later admitted it was a calculated decision, describing the cyclone as an opportunity to solve about half their population problem. So as the first thundering gales began lashing the shoreline around midnight on November 12th, there were no wailing sirens, no evacuation transports, only the steadily rising primal wail of wind and sea confirming millions of souls were hopelessly in the storm's crosshairs. Within hours, a tsunami-like rain-swollen wave broke through the night, an unstoppable 30-foot-high storm surge scouring the flimsy villages and huts clustered along the coastline. Death came swiftly in the initial deluge for the unsuspecting masses, as entire communities were abruptly swallowed whole by the fevered sea. In the low-lying island village of Manpura, 19-year-old Haimun awoke to the shrieking winds and howling waters plowing through the darkness. Panicked cries pierced the shroud of rain as he watched the first towering wave of black water rapidly converge on the scattering lantern lights of neighbors' homes. There was no sounding alarm, no advanced notice, only the thundering realization of the apocalypse descending. Haimun's own two-story home withstood the initial surge, but was quickly inundated as the waters transformed the village into a grotesque wading pool. Desperately, the young man gathered his family to the upper level of their creaking home. But the sea's ire could not be contained. Within minutes, the cyclone's unrelenting flood surges burst through doors and windows, already engulfing the entire bottom floor. His parents and siblings bobbed in the swirling currents, screaming for their lives as the structure was pummeled apart by 155 miles per hour winds and shearing waves. One by one, Haimun could only watch helplessly as his loved ones were torn from his grasp by the cyclone's claws and cast into the raging, pitch-black waters, disappearing into oblivion forever with each merciless surge. The young man's own life was only spared when a stray wooden beam smashed through the crumbling upper level, allowing him to lash himself with tattered rope to a swaying coconut tree just feet away from where his family home had once stood. Perched precariously above the rapidly rising deluge as his village was wholly consumed, Haimun squeezed his eyes shut, gritted his teeth, and prepared for a terrifying almost 12-hour gauntlet of hellfire and fury as the cyclone's back half unleashed its most punishing assault. For hour after endless hour through that rayless night, the young man ground his cut and bleeding forearms into the thrashing tree trunk as missiles of wind-whipped rain lashed him with the force of shrapnel. His sturdy perch nearly buckled, bending and creaking as each successive cyclonic gust hammered into him with volcanic intensity. Around him, a chorus of cacophonous horror played on an endless loop, the deafening howl of 155 miles per hour winds, punctuated by the shrieks of desperate souls as they were consumed by the storm's swirling black vortex. Wide swaths of land transformed into rubbled, liquid nightmares that could be glimpsed between the cyclone's demonic swirling squalls. All Haimun could do was dig his nails into the whipping tree bark like rosary beads as each fresh fiery gale threatened to rip him off his pitiful lifeline. baying for salvation that would not come for over 12 agonizing hours until the storm finally broke its demonic tantrum. When the sun rose over the Bay of Bengal in the early hours of November 13th, it revealed one of the most horrifying scenes of death and ruination ever visited in a single day upon the human species. An endless sea of water stretched in every direction from Heyman's former home village of Manpura, a newly formed brackish tidal wave swallowing most of the former Ganges Delta, where splashes of destruction and debris now marked where towns and cities had once thrived. Entire islands had been scoured from existence, with nothing remaining besides scattered clumps of rooftops and road signs pocking above the swirling gruel, as if hit by a decade's worth of bombing raids in a single night. And everywhere, the bodies. A numbing sea of deceased men, women and children intermingled with carcasses of livestock, like some twisted nautical carpet. Across hundreds of miles of coast, the dead choked the saturated landscape, floating in muddied waterways or slung lifeless among any high ground or tangled debris fields. Rafts of bodies caked the shoreline in an endless wall of human wreckage, drifting in with the receding tide from the bay. When daylight surveys commenced, every living person to witness the aftermath was forever shattered by the chilling scale of devastation. The cyclone's paroxysms had simply shredded and drowned entire population centers. No government, no military could ever be capable of minimizing the complete apocalypse on the ground. Over 300,000 souls were officially tallied as casualties of the cyclone's landfall, genesis events, and flooding, believed to be one of the highest singularly catastrophic death tolls ever inflicted on a population center by a natural disaster or act of war in recorded human history. At least 70% of those killed were women and children. Entire family trees were erased, entire ancestral legacies mercilessly consumed by the cyclone's insatiable hunger. But most grimly, international observers investigating the cyclone's aftermath came to an inescapable and horrifying conclusion. The Bola cyclone had likely slaughtered multitudes more than the official first responder counts. Some experts later arrived at the chilling possibility that the 19th century-like death toll may have ultimately ranged into the millions when accounting for those swept out to sea or lost to disease, starvation, and exposure in the cyclone's wake across coastal Bangladesh. In a single night of celestial whiplash and savage elemental violence, a force of nature had committed global genocide on a scale seldom rivaled outside the most brutal chapters of human warfare. And it may have permanently purged the population of Bangladesh by up to an incomprehensible tenth or more. Yet the most disturbing cruelty of the Bola cyclone was only just beginning to reveal itself. For the stunned survivors scattered across the broken landscape and relief workers trying to make sense of the unimaginable carnage, the nightmare was only darkening. The worst scars and aftershocks still to come. The swath of death and chaos left by the cyclone detonated an almost immediate political firestorm. As the staggering humanitarian crisis and despair lingered across shattered Bangladesh, anger quickly erupted on all sides over the callous failure of warnings or evacuation procedures that could have prevented some casualties. When the former West Pakistani ruling regime predictably dismissed the cyclone as an act of divine providence, while making no offers of humanitarian aid, the backlash boiled over into fury across Bangladesh. The Bola disaster had revealed the oppressive military junta's true genocidal colors towards its ethnically Bengali people. As video documentation of the apocalyptic aftermath reached the outside world, the graphic spectacle of floating corpses and whole villages erased stirred conscience-shocking outrage. It was unacceptable that the early cyclone warnings detected by international meteorologists had not been relayed to save lives. Donated relief funds and supplies were blocked from reaching the hardest-hit areas by Pakistani forces exerting martial control. In one of the most shameful acts of the post-colonial era, the genocidal Khan regime exploited the cyclone tragedy not through preparation or mercy, but as a twisted means to double down on its oppression of ethnic Bengalis and secession efforts across East Pakistan through starvation, blockades, and military crackdown. As Khan's dreaded secret directives came to light, including his sickening quote that the cyclone had conveniently solved half their population problem, the world witnessed crimes against humanity unfolding in real time. Bangladeshi political leaders who dared call for aid were executed. Relief convoys were commandeered at gunpoint to be diverted to West Pakistani citizens instead. And folks, it's created a great tension among both parties, and you know what it's just a starting of a new battle that would literally shake in the world. This is not the end of this story. It's just an interval because from here, the world is going to face something which is even more worse. Be with me and I will see you in part 2 of this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and press on the bell icon to see what happens next that will shake the world. Thank you.